John Wesley, born on June 28, 1703, in Epworth, England, was a man whose life and ministry profoundly shaped the course of Christian history. Raised in a deeply religious household, Wesley was influenced early on by his devout mother, Susanna, and his father, Samuel, an Anglican clergyman. A dramatic rescue from a fire at his family's home at the age of 5, a moment Wesley later referred to as being a brand plucked from the burning, fostered in him a sense of divine purpose that would guide his entire life. Educated at Oxford University, Wesley became a Fellow of Lincoln College, where he and his brother Charles formed the Holy Club, a group dedicated to prayer, Bible study, and good works. This group's disciplined approach earned them the nickname Methodists, a term that would later define a global Christian movement. Despite his early religious devotion, Wesley struggled with doubts about his faith, particularly during a missionary journey to Georgia in 1735. It was during this period that he encountered a group of Moravians whose unwavering faith during a perilous storm at sea deeply impressed him. However, it wasn't until May 24, 1738, that Wesley experienced a profound spiritual awakening, often referred to as his Aldersgate experience, where he felt his heart strangely warmed and finally found assurance in his salvation. This experience ignited a fiery passion in Wesley, driving him to preach with newfound fervor. However, his methods were unconventional for the time, and he found himself unwelcome in many Anglican churches. Undeterred, Wesley began preaching in the open air, reaching thousands who had never before heard the gospel. His sermons resonated with the common people, and his message of grace and personal holiness sparked a revival across Britain. Wesley's ministry was not just about preaching, it was about transforming lives. He organized his followers into small groups, or societies, where they could support each other in their spiritual growth. These societies became the foundation of Methodism, a movement characterized by a strong emphasis on personal discipline, social justice, and outreach to the poor and marginalized. Throughout his life, Wesley traveled over 250,000 miles on horseback, preaching more than 40,000 sermons. His tireless work led to the establishment of the Methodist Church, which spread rapidly throughout Britain and into the American colonies. Wesley was deeply involved in issues of social reform, including education, prison reform, and the abolition of slavery. John Wesley passed away on March 2, 1791, at the age of 87. His final words, "The best of all is, God is with us," encapsulated the essence of his faith and ministry. Wesley left behind a legacy that continues to influence Christianity today. The Methodist movement, which began with a small group of Oxford students, grew into a global denomination with millions of adherents worldwide. Wesley's life was marked by an unwavering commitment to the gospel, a tireless work ethic, and a deep love for all people, regardless of their social status. His influence extends far beyond the Methodist Church, impacting the broader Christian tradition through his teachings on grace, personal holiness, and social justice. John Wesley's life and ministry stand as a testament to the transformative power of faith and the enduring impact of a life lived in service to God. Some notable moments in John Wesley's life. Number 1. The Great Revival at Gwennap Pit. In the summer of 1762, John Wesley found himself in Cornwall, where he preached at the natural amphitheatre known as Gwennap Pit. This site, formed by a collapsed mine, became one of Wesley's favorite preaching spots due to its remarkable acoustics. On this particular day, over 30,000 people gathered to hear him speak, a staggering number, given the rural setting. As Wesley began to preach, the crowd fell silent, and a profound sense of reverence settled over the pit. His voice carried through the air, reaching even those on the farthest edges of the assembly. Wesley spoke of God's grace and the need for personal transformation. The atmosphere was electric, and many in the crowd were moved to tears. Wesley later recorded in his journal that the Spirit of God was so palpable that it seemed as if every heart in the vast assembly was touched by the message. This event became legendary in the history of Methodism and is remembered as one of the most powerful moments of the revival. 2. The Ghost in the Epworth Rectory. One of the most curious and unsettling events in Wesley's life occurred at his childhood home, the Epworth Rectory. Beginning in December 1716, the rectory became the center of a series of unexplained disturbances, later known as the Wesley poltergeist. For several months, The family experienced strange and terrifying occurrences, loud knocks, footsteps, and the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across the floor, though nothing was ever moved. The mysterious noises often followed the family members from room to room, but no source was ever found. John Wesley, who was away at school during most of the incidents, received letters from his family detailing the strange happenings. Despite his initial skepticism, Wesley became convinced that the disturbances were real and possibly demonic. The events at Epworth Rectory left a lasting impression on Wesley, influencing his later views on the spiritual world and the reality of evil. 3. The unexpected conversion in the foundry. In 1739, Wesley began preaching in a disused foundry in London, which he had converted into a chapel and mission centre. One evening, as Wesley was delivering a sermon, a commotion erupted in the back of the hall. A group of rowdy men, known for their disruptive behaviour, had entered, intent on causing trouble. Wesley paused his sermon and looked directly at them, his gaze unwavering. Instead of rebuking them, he invited them to come forward and listen. The men, taken aback by Wesley's calm and authoritative presence, reluctantly complied. As Wesley continued to preach, something remarkable happened. One by one, the men began to weep. The leader of the group, a notorious troublemaker, was so moved by Wesley's words that he fell to his knees in repentance. This moment marked a dramatic conversion for the entire group, who became some of Wesley's most dedicated followers. The event demonstrated Wesley's ability to reach even the hardest of hearts with his message of grace and redemption. 4. The miracle at John Wesley's chapel. One of the most striking miracles associated with Wesley occurred at his chapel in Bristol. A woman named Anne Rogers, who had been paralyzed for several years, was brought to the chapel in a desperate state. Her friends had to carry her in on a makeshift stretcher, as she was completely unable to walk. Wesley, deeply moved by her plight, prayed over her with great fervor. As he prayed, he felt a surge of faith and boldly declared that she would walk. To the amazement of everyone present, Anne suddenly stood up and began to walk around the chapel, praising God. The congregation erupted in joyful celebration, and the story of her miraculous healing spread quickly throughout the city. This event not only strengthened the faith of those who witnessed it but also brought many new converts to Methodism. 5. The encounter with the Oxford students. In the early years of his ministry, Wesley returned to Oxford University, where he had once studied and where the Holy Club had been formed. By this time, he had gained a reputation as a fiery preacher, and his visits to Oxford were often met with both anticipation and opposition. On one occasion, Wesley was invited to preach in the university chapel. As he delivered his sermon, he spoke directly to the students, challenging their complacency and calling them to a life of true holiness. His words were sharp and uncompromising, and many in the congregation were offended. After the service, several students confronted Wesley, accusing him of being too harsh and judgmental. Wesley, unfazed, responded with his characteristic directness, "I speak not to please men, but to save their souls. What I have said out of love, that you may awake out of your slumber and seek the living God." Though his words were not well received at the time, many of those students later reflected on Wesley's message and became his followers, realizing that his stern warnings had been motivated by genuine concern for their spiritual well-being. 6. The vision of the New World. In the final years of his life, Wesley had a profound experience that seemed to foreshadow the global impact of Methodism. One night, as he was praying alone in his study, Wesley felt a deep sense of peace and a powerful vision unfolded before him. He saw a vast multitude of people from all over the world, men, women, and children of every race and nation, gathered together, singing hymns and praising God. Wesley understood this vision as a confirmation of the far-reaching influence of the Methodist movement, which had already begun to spread across the British Isles and into the American colonies. The vision filled Wesley with renewed energy and purpose, even in his old age. He became more determined than ever to continue preaching and organizing societies, confident that the work he had started would continue long after his death. This vision of the New World inspired Wesley to support the establishment of Methodist missions overseas, particularly in America, where the movement would eventually flourish. These stories of John Wesley's life highlight the extraordinary nature of his ministry, marked by miraculous events, profound spiritual encounters, and a relentless dedication to spreading the message of God's grace to all people. Each event not only shaped Wesley's life but also left a lasting legacy that continues to influence Christians around the world today. Tell us how John Wesley's life challenges or inspires you. God bless you.